We actually have two speakers coming up at the same time. They both work for the New York City Council data team. Rose has a twin sister who also works for the New York City government. And Brooke knows all the words to the rap in the movie Teen Witch. Definitely got to get some twin jokes in here or something. So everyone, please welcome to the stage, Rose and Brooke.
Thank you, Jared, for the introductions. The New York City Council is the city's lawmaking legislative body. We will go over some examples of projects that show the role of data in the New York City's lawmaking process. So our work leads to smarter laws, and therefore that leads to improving the lives of New Yorkers. Here is our team, our lovely team, pictures of us. We are a team that has background in physics, statistics, visualization, communication, policy, and planning. The team is mostly an R user group. Next slide. So our mission is to promote a data-driven approach to the New York City Council's decision-making processes. This is accomplished by working closely with the legislative staff while they're generating laws and doing oversight duties, and communicating our findings to the general public. So what we do. So we have three main data functions. The first one is data laws. Data laws are laws that require agencies to report data to us. And this feeds the second pillar, which is data analysis. And data analysis is a step where we make sense of the data, and that will inform existing and future legislation. And lastly, we wrap up the results nicely in visualizations and communicate findings to internal staff and to the public. So now we will give some examples of our work in each of these three functions. And Brooke, if you can please tell us what we do in terms of data analysis.
Sure. So as far as data analysis goes, it's one of our core functions. We source data. We often source data from the New York City Open Data Portal, which is an amazing resource if you don't know about it. We clean data, we transform it, we model it, and then we eventually turn our findings into actionable insights that will inform legislation and policy. Go to the next slide. So as Rose mentioned before, there's like some nice synergy between all of these steps, and especially between the reporting bill or the data law bill and then the like sort of the like data laws and then the analysis side of things. So a good example of this sort of synergy is this Climate Mobilization Act, or Local Law 97. Local Law 97 mandated or set sort of thresholds on how much greenhouse gases buildings over 25,000 square feet or more can emit. And so in order to come up with these thresholds, we needed to understand the sort of universe of emissivity, to understand what characteristics a building had that sort of were predictive of emitting greenhouse gases. So this law relied heavily on a reporting bill law, Local Law 84, which mandated that buildings of that size report on energy usage. So we, in order to like understand and set reasonable and achievable thresholds for these buildings, we had to really like investigate what features of a building were predictive of emissivity. So we used a lot of different kinds of models to interrogate that information. We used XGBoost, we used Forecast to understand the seasonality. And what we came up with was that, and it's not surprising, but that it's not so much like the way a building is constructed or sort of like where the building sits on a hill, but it's really all about the work that is being done within the building that's going to be most predictive of how much greenhouse gas it emits. So then we were able to use this information to group buildings like buildings within like buildings, and sort of like create these buckets, and then sort of reasonable thresholds within these buckets that we felt were fair, because we set like sort of limits. The thresholds were like relative to other like buildings. So that was a really exciting and big law that we worked on, and it will hopefully have a major impact on the city, as the mayor and his administration have set this goal of an 80% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide. Oh, yeah. So a good example also of our work informing policy is what we sort of did with the taxi medallion task force. So this task force convened to try and understand and fix this sort of crisis that yellow cab drivers are facing. So just to summarize, if you're a yellow cab driver in New York City, you need to own a medallion. Medallions have been increasing in cost over the last 10 years, and the amount that you can sort of make being a yellow cab driver has gone down. So we wanted to understand when and why this is happening. So we looked at historical data, daily earnings data for each medallion, and try to understand, like, I mean, there's seasonality, of course, but try to understand, like, at what point did the trend start to really sharply decline? And we found that, and it's not surprising, but it's nice to have this confirmed with data, that as soon as like around the time that these for-hire gig economy, sort of Lyft and Uber cars came onto the scene and saturated the market, that's when sort of wages started to really, really decline. And so we incorporated that into the policy recommendations that went to the state finally. And I think recently the state released some recommendations on how to sort of fix and help mitigate this issue. You can go to the next slide. So as we mentioned before, data laws or reporting bills are really important to the work we do, because they give us the data that we need in order to do the important analyses and sort of reframe legislative issues in like a more scientific way. So reporting bills require city agencies to report specific info on their activities to the city council and or the open data portal. So metrics that show their what sort of work they're doing and how well they're doing that work. Next slide. So I'll go through the next couple slides will be like context, like what is the process, and how does a bill become a law, and where do we sort of step in? So the process for creating a data law, and more broadly legislation, is that we sit down with central staff or elected officials and their staff members to understand the issue at hand and see if it can be reframed in a quantitative way. So we sit down with them, we're like, is there too much trash in a neighborhood, and should we have better service in that neighborhood, or is that just one block and maybe some anomaly that doesn't require like a whole entire sort of law to fix? Oftentimes we realize that we don't have enough data, that there is some data that like can describe the problem like a little bit, but maybe not enough to really like understand why the problem is. And so oftentimes the solution is we have to get more data, and that requires the reporting bill. We come up with this issue of privacy concerns. As data people, we want high resolution, very granular spatio-temporal data, and we have to also be mindful of people's privacy, especially, in the city of New York. There's lots of concerns there. We also, like, an interesting sort of thing that we have to consider is that the laws have to be future proof. So we can't like specify, or it's important to like make sure that the laws are flexible in the future. So if we specify specific technology that may eventually become obsolete, that law is going to be kind of like encumbered by that specification. It's going to be hard to adjust. And so we want to make sure that everything sort of like we describe the technology, but we don't use specific sort of brands, which has been a tricky thing for us. Go to the next slide. So the process of a bill becoming a law. So a bill starts out as and I'm sure everyone is, maybe a lot of people are familiar with this process, but it might be a little bit different at the city level. But an idea becomes a sort of legislative request. A legislative request is the formalization of like the idea. So it becomes something that then gets circulated within staff members, lawyers, and is turned from an idea into legalese. So it's turned into legal language. This is where we often sit down with the lawyers and talk about how to make sure that like all of the quantitative aspects of this idea or of this issue are considered. And if it is a reporting bill, are we asking for the like right, level of granularity? Are we asking for the right sort of temporal sequence? Are we asking for the right geographic sort of unit? Are we asking for enough information that would let us sort of like answer the question or solve the problem or monitor the issue? So this is where we spend a lot of time at this step. The bill then, once we have these like sort of internal conversations, the bill is introduced. And that's when, after that point, that's when the public has a chance and advocates have a chance to sort of weigh in and say, remind us of things that we didn't think of, which happens every time. It's a huge, important step. And then, eventually, once all of that sort of like lots of editing and drafting and sort of reformatting the bill, it becomes this thing that then is gets voted on, and that's that needs a majority vote from the council, and then the mayor, it then goes to the mayor's desk, and the mayor can either veto it, which I don't think he has done in this administration, or he can sign it, or he can just leave it be, and then it becomes a law after 30 days. So Rose is going to give you an example of one of our reporting bills that's very timely and we're really excited about because we're working on it actively.
So the pay equity bill is an example where we provided a lot of support to the legislative staff that were drafting the bill. We helped them think through the language, so the characteristics and variables that should be included in the bill. So the intent of the pay equity reporting bill is for agencies to report employee information to us. That way we can then investigate pay inequities in the city workforce. So during this process of drafting and negotiating the bill, we met with advocates and the agencies involved in this process, which is the Department of Administrative Services. This is the New York City agency that collects employee information for a lot of the city workforce. So the woman in the photo is Council Member Lori Cumbo. She is the prime sponsor of the bill. She is very excited and happy about this bill, as you can see. So when talking with her and with advocates, they only had in mind 3 variables: gender, race, and age. They were very fixed that these variables were enough to explain pay inequities, and it might be the case, but we told them that these 3 variables are not enough. There might be other confounding variables or characteristics that will do a better job in explaining pay differences. So we listed a whole bunch of them, as you can see up here. So some of them are like years of experience. Are you in a manager position? your education level, etc. So this helped significantly in order for us to answer the question that they were looking for, to explain pay inequities. So this bill is one of the first of its kind as well in terms of how the data is being reported to us. We will be getting access to the data via an API. We are very excited. So the City Council will have access to person level data. So there's privacy concerns here. So we only have access to this data set for a period of time every year. And the public, so advocates really wanted this data to be available for the public to view and analyze. But due to privacy issues, it was agreed upon to make public an aggregated version and not all the variables. So this is already out there if anyone's interested. I guess if we share slides, or you can search on the open data portal for the local law. It's out there, but so this is the timeline before COVID of when we would receive access to the API. So we just got access to it a week ago, and we're in the middle of just digging into the data. We have no immediate findings yet. We know that we have to deal with missing data. We don't know how consistent employee information is reported across all the agencies, but that's something that we're very excited to dig into, and maybe at a future point, or I'm sure there'll probably be a release of the findings, and we'll be in the news. Okay, so moving on to our last data function, it's data visualization. So communicating our findings in a way that is easily understandable by everyone and pushing our work onto GitHub or the council webpage for others to add and collaborate on is the main goal of this process. So an example of a project that does this is Evictions in New York City. So this project, we worked on it when the Speaker of the Council held another position at the same time, the interim public advocate. The former public advocate went on to another role. So I guess due to law, he becomes the interim public advocate. So evictions is a big issue area for the council. The council passed also another legislation, first of its kind, called Right to Counsel. So this legislation seeks to decrease or address the eviction crisis in New York City by providing free legal assistance to those going through an evictions proceeding. It's being rolled out in stages. So at one point, 20-something, I'm not too sure, it'll be available across the whole city. But also this remains an ongoing issue due to COVID. There's a moratorium on evictions, but at the end of the year, it will be lifted unless it's extended. So there might be a big rise in evictions if it's not extended. So we put this page together to showcase the council's bill and to see the facts of this bill. There has been decreases in evictions in the city, and also just to show where it still remains an issue. As you can see in the Bronx, there's a lot of evictions there. So in this process of putting the charts and the maps together, the data source, the eviction data set on the open data portal lacked latitude and longitude columns despite having address information. So the addresses were very dirty. So if you were to put them in a geocoder, it wouldn't spit out the latitude and longitude for you. It would give you an NA. So what we did was did a script that cleaned the addresses. So using gsub and regular expressions to clean the addresses, we were able to get the latitude and longitudes using the New York City's geocoding API. And that led us to be able to map at this fine level before that, the only maps of evictions in the city were at the zip code level. So advocates were really excited to see these maps out there. And the housing data advocates reached out to us thanking for our work and putting the code out there. It helped them cross-check their own work that they've been doing on evictions and hopefully expand on our scope of the project at that time. So this sort of hits all our points and goals of data visualization, this project. So I guess to start wrapping up, maybe Brooke, do you want to tell us what has been our success strategies in embedding data at the council?
Sure. So I guess the reason why we exist is because we have support from leadership and higher ups, and that the speaker of the city council does really believe in data and using data to inform policy and legislation, and all of our bosses really do believe in that too. And it's and lawyers who are writing the laws are really receptive to like conversations with us about how to use data and how to think about data in like new and different ways when it comes to legislation. But I think like, and these like sort of strengths predate me because I'm newer than Rose and much of the team, but that we have a strong like sort of core like visualization effort and this this sort of like goal or this ethos of like making our findings really interpretable and legible to the general public. We strongly believe that everyone should be able to understand our results, and that's really big, especially when you're dealing with so many different audiences, like non-technical and technical. Like everyone should be able to understand things, and visualization, I think, is really important for that. And then we have some really strong quantitative and technical people on our team that can, like in creative ways, reframe these, you know, legislative issues or these constituent issues almost into quantitative scientific questions. And so I think we're really good at like incorporating the scientific method and just using our scientific backgrounds and making that really like integral into the legislative process. And that's, yeah, those are things I'm really excited about. Rose, do you want to talk about the things that are hard?
So there are challenges that we're slowly chipping at, and still maybe walls to climb over. So sometimes due to timelines or the staff are just too busy, or maybe even if they forget us, they bring us in too late. So there's a question, a problem that they want us to help with, and they're like, can you do this by tomorrow? And we're like, well, probably not. So we don't have the opportunity at that time to go in depth or like in depth enough to give them an adequate, correct response to their question. And that also feeds into managing expectations. Sometimes they think we can do magic, but sometimes we're limited to the quality of the data. The data quality is poor. We can't give sort of estimates with a certain amount of certainty, things like that. And then lastly, our own projects. Most of the time, our work is very reactive to what's in the news or agendas of the council and other council members. So long-term projects that we have, our time on them is limited compared to the amount of time we spend on these more reactive short-term projects. So I guess to summarize, our role at the council is new and I guess for the better for New Yorkers and the laws that are coming out of it. Before, there was no scientific or quantitative thinking put into a lot of these laws. So sometimes like, so like more thought is going towards like numbers that are being written into the law. So, or processes have gone through like some sort of check of what's happening, of what's the data telling us, and maybe sometimes this can contradict what a constituent thinks is happening on their block, and they assume that that's happening everywhere in New York City. So I think in a short amount of time, we've done a lot, but we still have some challenges. I don't know, Brooke, if you want to add anything.
I mean, we're a team that has grown from, I think it was just Rose and one other, maybe two other people. And like the confidence of the growth, like the confidence in what we do is like sort of represented by how much our team has grown and how yeah, like the work that we've sort of done at a micro and macro scale, whether it be like, here's the data set that you need, and here's that like mean that you are looking for, to like more sophisticated models to understand like really complex problems. So I just think, yeah, and we work on a lot of different projects, a lot of different topics. So you're not working on one thing forever. You're working on housing, and then you're working on greenhouse gases, and then you're working on, you know, I don't know, a million other things. So it's
so thanks to everyone that's watching. Here is our contact info for our team, our GitHub page, our website, and our Twitter handles. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And thank you again for watching.
We still have more ahead for you. And I'll show you that in a second. But I do think that when they talk about how to make a bill, did anybody else think that they should make a city version of Schoolhouse Rock? I think that would be great to see a data thing involving Schoolhouse Rock. I think that would be pretty awesome.